Good evening, and this will be part 2 of my video that I'm sharing with you about my rapture dream that I had last week. And I mentioned in the previous video that I had my first rapture dream that I've ever had. And you know, I know we don't base our lives upon dreams, but Yahuwah does use dreams to communicate to his people. In fact, it's stated in the Word that that's accurate. So I'm sharing that, and I'm going to read some verses in the scripture, of course, that points this out. But because some people, they don't have any kind of, if you say you had a dream about a certain thing, they just dismiss it. And I don't say that all dreams are of Yahuwah or that we should base our lives upon them. But as long as the dreams that we have line up with the word of Yahuwah and they don't violate the scriptures in any way, then they're really a great way that Yahuwah uses to communicate to his people. Now, with that said, I want to read in Acts chapter 2 to verify what I'm saying here, not just taking my word for it, but the Apostle Peter in the book of Acts chapter 2, talking about the latter days, and he, starting in verse 16, he says, "But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel, and it shall come to pass that in the last days, saith Elohim," or God, "I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." Well, I'm an old man, and so I guess I fall in this category of dreams. Now, of course, I know that other people have dreams and they're not old men, but the fact is that this is one in the latter days. The Apostle Peter, making reference to what the prophet Joel had written in Joel chapter 2, that in the latter days that Yahuwah would pour out his ruach, or his spirit, upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Well, I had a dream, and it was about the rapture. And I do want to just not take a lot of time just going back through it again, but just to highlight a few things that I want to emphasize about the dream that I had. And I mentioned in my last presentation that that one of the things that really drew my attention or caught my attention about this particular event, and of course I mentioned that I was in my home. It was just an ordinary day. It was bright, sunshiny outside. I'm just saying it's probably around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It seemed like to be maybe a summer time frame or early fall, but it was just you know, nice, bright, warm day. And I was in my house, and I was going through one room to another. As I was walking through to the next room, the blinds were open, and I looked to my left and looked out the window. And when I first glanced, it looked like it was like turning like it does right before a storm, where everything becomes dark and cloudy and so forth. And so I walked over to the window so I could see it better, and it was pitch black dark. It wasn't just cloudy, it was completely dark. And this fear came upon me, because I realized this is not normal. Something is about to happen. And when that did happen, of course, I mentioned that I felt this energy just coming into my body, just flowing into it. And it was, I mean, again, this was a dream, but I actually felt like I could feel it. You know, it was just so real. And at the same time, I began to ascend, go up. And I knew it was like I said, this is it. It actually is happening. The rapture is actually happening. And the excitement of that, and the reality of experiencing that was so real. I mean, it was something that it's just hard to explain. In fact, I think a lot of dreams sometimes are. They're so real that you wake up and you just realize that you've gone through something that's not just something that that you hoped would happen or whatever, but you were actually experiencing it. And that's the way I felt. I was actually experiencing the experience. And but there was also this like a dread, or like that I was the realization that I was going, but there were people being left behind that I knew, and that there were a lot of people that weren't prepared, but it was too late to do anything. Nothing. In other words, this was happening. It was not you had any time to go tell anybody. You couldn't, warn them, hey, it's here. And as I mentioned, the darkness was so apparent. Me looking out this window, when I was looking out my window, and then as I'm going up, the realization that this has actually happened, I happened to yell out and just excitement, and it woke me up. And but the thing that I began to meditate and think about after this dream was the fact is that why was it dark? Why did it turn dark like that? We hardly ever think about the rapture, there's being a darkness, but I believe the Scripture teaches, just like in fact the Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, declared that as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. And another thing that hit me about all this was that it was a normal day. It was not like some kind of crazy events were happening and all of a sudden, people are already waiting for the rapture to happen. It was not that at all. It was just like a normal afternoon. And of course that fits in perfectly with the description of what Yahushua said, that he said, as in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking, they were given in marriage until the flood came and took them all away. And of course, which is the part about judgment coming. Immediately judgment came. And so the rapture is, of course, for believers, it's not a judgment. It's actually the completion of our redemption. This corruptible shall put on incorruption, and this mortal, the mortal body that you and I have, will be changed to immortality. Redemption is not complete until that happens. We're saved in the realm of the Ruach, in the realm of the Spirit. Those that have received the Messiah, you've experienced salvation in the realm of the Ruach, because we have His Spirit, we have His life in us. This is what makes us like Him. We become partakers of the divine nature. That's Yahuwah's nature when we're born again. We're baptized into one Ruach. You have the same Ruach, the same Spirit, if you're born again, that I have. And it is the Spirit of Mashiach. Romans chapter 8 says, if any man have not the Spirit or the Ruach of Messiah, you don't belong to him. So, but we're waiting for the adoption to be complete, the redemption of our physical bodies, when this mortal shall have put on immortality. This is really what the rapture is all about. It is the resurrection. There are multiple resurrections throughout the Scripture. And Yahushua being the first fruits of the resurrection, he is the first fruits, but it says over the book of Corinthians, Paul made reference to the fact that that we all in our own order will experience there's different references to the different resurrections that will take place. And of course, any believer that is resurrected in the resurrection will be part of the first resurrection. And I've mentioned this before, that the first resurrection doesn't mean there's just one resurrection in number. When it references the first resurrection, it's talking about the resurrection of the righteous is a type of resurrection, and not just one event, because Yahushua was the first one to be raised, and he is the first fruits of the resurrection. And then of course we at his coming will receive our resurrected bodies. Now people get the rapture mixed up with the second coming. They're two different events. And I'm not going to have the time to go through that with you today, but I plan to go more into this, because there's so much ignorance, there's so much deception out there that people have about the rapture. And so we're going to take the time to go through the Scriptures. You don't have to take my word for it. Prove all things, hold fast to that which is good, and do the research. Don't take verses out of context. And that's really where most people get all messed up, is they take verses out of context and who the verse is talking to. That's another a problem with a lot of prophecy interpretation is who the verses are talking to. Is it talking to Israel or Yasharel, or is it talking to the church? Which I know a lot of people get offended by that word, but let me tell you, the church, whether you like it or not, is composed of Jew and Gentile, born again, spirit-filled believers who have received the Spirit. They are the church. They're not Israel. See, Yahuwah has made a covenant. He's made promises to the nation of Yasharel that he will finish and complete. But he's also made promises to the church, being Jew and Gentiles, that we are not appointed to Yahuwah's wrath. And believe me, the tribulation, Daniel, which is really properly should be called Daniel's 70th week, is all about Yasharel, about Israel. It's not about the church. Of course, the church, i.e. being born again Jew and Gentile believers. And Yahushua himself declared in Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, that there's a promise made to those that he would deliver his body, that he would deliver us from the hour of tribulation, or the time of temptation. Of course, that's talking about the tribulation. And the word there, the Greek word that's used, is ek in the Greek, and it means to take out from. It doesn't mean, a lot of people, that don't believe in the rapture, they say, well, we're not protected to be taken out, but we're just protected during the tribulation. Which is, if you just really do your study, you find that could not be true. First of all, again, going back to that Greek word ek, it means to take out. So Yahushua declared that he would take us out of that time frame. That is a promise to the church. And so, and of course, the tribulation is in the Daniel 70th week, is all about removing the sinners off the earth. It's for judgment coming upon the unbelievers on the earth. It's also a time of Jacob's trouble. It's a time of bringing the nation of Yasharel into the realization that who their Messiah is. It has nothing to do with the church. And again, that's just an English word. The word actually is, in Hebrew, would be kahel. And Yahushua himself declared in Matthew chapter 16, talking about he was going to build his church, or his assembly, upon the fact of who he was. And we know that that salvation is not just for the nation of Yasharel or Israel, but it's for all who would look to him and believe and recognize who the Messiah is. Salvation was now being extended to all nations of the earth. I'm going to pick this up, and this is going a little longer on our next teaching. I do want to read some more in the scriptures and point out some things that are very relevant to the dream that I had, and I want to elaborate on some of the things that I believe Yahuwah was showing me that he wants me to share with you as well. So please listen in, and we'll pick some of this up on our next teaching. Until then, shalom.